Michael Dukakis will not appear before the delegates until tomorrow night. It will be the crowning glory of a very long and hard campaign for the Massachusetts governor. But he says he's actually enjoyed most of it. Jack Conaty is on the floor with more on that. Jack.
And tonight is the night the Democrats are actually making it official that Michael Dukakis will carry their banner in 1988. An experience Dukakis says is a real kick. For Michael Dukakis, the roll call vote is not yet underway, but the demonstrations certainly are. Our Jim Ryan is standing by now upstairs with a report on the strategies of the Dukakis campaign. Jim?
And George Bush won't become the GOP's official candidate until the convention in New Orleans next month. But for the Dukakis and the Democrats, the campaign starts full throttle tonight. And it's getting clearer how they're planning to beat Bush. Jack Conaty is out in the convention center with more on that. Jack?
Corinne, the Democrats have not been able to generate much suspense here, but they're trying very hard to generate a mood, a feeling. It's really a bit of back to the future, and the era they're trying to evoke is the 1960s. Tonight, all this will end with a giant victory party. The rock groups will be the same, a subtle but certain appeal to the baby boom generation. Corinne, back to you.
Thanks very much, Jack. President Reagan took time out from preparing tonight's address to make a surprise appearance at a tribute to his wife, Nancy. My colleague, Jack Conaty, is here now with more on that. Jack.
Corinne, day one of the convention has been dedicated to the Reagans. The president is expected to make an emotional last hurrah speech tonight, and earlier today it was Nancy Reagan's turn in the spotlight. The vehicle was a luncheon at the New Orleans Convention Center, a luncheon to honor a woman who has had, for better or worse, an enormous impact on the Reagan presidency. The problem is money. But aside from the mergers and the closings, the church is going to have to raise more money. Always a very difficult and sensitive task.
We have to do it as church members.
Many cities, including here in Chicago. You might think, in light of all that bad publicity, that the city of Chicago would have difficulty in attracting applicants for the police department. The reality, however, is quite different.
I can't see how a person could, even take themselves to that level, but because that's...
I told him, I said, do not be surprised at the amount of press that shows up. He said, what do you mean? Because in all fairness, he's a great guy, but when he goes to a normal press conference, you have one local reporter and a half a newspaper. So now we have CNN, AP, this, that. This isn't your normal situation. But they do write about me fairly and falsely, and a lot. And it's, it's ridiculous, frankly. I don't know why, but it's ridiculous.
There are many who would agree, but for better or worse, Trump is a symbol of the 80s. A larger-than-life yuppie whose appetite seemed consistent with the times. But the times, they are a-changin'. And Trump's financial woes now mirror a different decade. A decade in which $450,000 condominiums are auctioned for less than 100 grand. For 9:30, I'm Jack Conaty. Every once in a while, we run across a week where the theme could be, oh no, not again. We seem to be ending one of those weeks tonight, though the stories that caught the headlines will no doubt be around for some time to come. At the top of the agenda, the Middle East. After 4 failed diplomatic missions, the New World Order of James Baker and George Bush looks almost exactly like the Old World Order. Save the fact that the Kurds still have no home, and there are almost...
From freedom in the Mideast to violence in the Midwest, another bloody weekend on the streets of Chicago. Police say 7 people were murdered, 18 wounded in more than 30 shootings. 10 other people were stabbed over the weekend. Jack Conaty joins us now as we continue our series of special reports on the impact of gangs, drugs, and violence on our city. Jack?
Chris, 1991 has been a tough year in this city, marked by a lingering recession and an increase in violent crime. But one business in Chicago is booming, and it even added a new product line. On the streets, they call it Ready Rock. In the media, we call it crack.
The guys are doing the deal right now in the middle of the street.
You've got the money right now. We're going to turn off and go in now. Is everybody in place?
Crack right now is on the verge of becoming an epidemic if it isn't already. In certain sections of the city of Chicago.
Pearl Harbor was one of those very rare watershed events in the history of the world. a day which separated all that had gone before from all that came after.
It is, for the survivors, a bittersweet reunion here on Oahu half a century later, moments haunted by memories. More than 2,400 Americans lost their lives here with the Japanese attack that dragged the United States into World War II. Russ McCurdy was a Marine stationed on the Arizona.
I still think of my Marine buddies and all the shipmates that we lost that day.
Okay. I was a shell load on a 5-inch gun, and so that's where I went. And from the time I got there, it was already happening.
Riveting memories. And right now, we've got one of our own reporters who's at Pearl Harbor. That's Jack Conaty, who joins us now live. And Jack, what has been the mood at Pearl Harbor this week?
Well, Bruce, it's been sort of a combination of excitement and sadness. Excitement in the fact that many of these survivors were able to hold the 50th reunion. That was very important to many of them. But it's also very sad because so many of their friends they had when they were 19, 20, 21 years old, are buried out here in the harbor behind me and in the National Cemetery outside of Honolulu.
Well, Jack, do you think after 50 years, is the feeling out there maybe it's starting, maybe time to put this whole thing to rest? I mean, it was 50 years ago.
Well, you know, Dan, I think that's what the president intends to do tomorrow. I think he has to walk a very delicate line when talking to the survivors. He can't say anything that's going to offend them. At the same time, he can't say anything that's going to offend the Japanese. You're right, what happened here happened 50 years ago. We have to look towards the future, and Japan is going to play a very large part in our future.
Jack, there's been a massive amount of media attention paid to this, hasn't there?
Yes, there has. Which I can't help but feel has something to do with the location, Bruce. But there are about 1,500 registered journalists here with the Navy. That's about 200 to 300 more than were in the Persian Gulf. So it's gotten an enormous amount of attention.
Now, you know, in your report on the 9 o'clock news, you kind of intimated or demonstrated that the area is not as the servicemen remember it from 50 years ago.
Well, you know, I had never been here before, and I sort of had this notion that Hawaii was going to look like the films I had seen about the attacks on Pearl Harbor. I expected it to be updated to some degree, but not to the degree I found it. Some of the veterans who had not been here for 50 years were amazed when they came back to see how many high-rise buildings there are and to find out that the economy here in Hawaii is really geared to the Japanese, not to Americans.
Jack, thanks for the report. That's Jack Conaty live from Pearl Harbor. Let's continue now. And
has budgeted more than $2 million for security. As in New York, you can't find the homeless this week near the Dome, and there are no hookers on the streets. The Houston police insist the guard is not needed, but if it was, the person who would have to make that call is that feisty Texas Democrat, Governor Ann Richards. Jack Conaty, Fox News, Houston. This was a week that had a little something for everyone. Politics, economics, crime, and sports. But it was the first act of America's 1992 political theater that grabbed the biggest headlines. There had been plenty of signals, plenty of polls, but the results in the Republican primary were still somewhat of a shocker.
Well, the party is really in full swing in New York City's Madison Square Garden. At this hour, Chicago Mayor Richard Daley is on the podium at the Democratic National Convention, addressing the problem of crime and drugs in the nation's cities. Mayor Daley comes on the heels of rousing speeches by the Reverend Jesse Jackson and former President Jimmy Carter. We have several reports tonight on the Democratic Convention. First, let's go live to our political reporter, Jack Conaty, standing by live at Madison Square Garden. Good evening, Jack.
Good evening, Chris. Mayor Daley just stepped off the podium. As you know, his subject was crime tonight. That's something he knows something about as a former state's attorney and a problem he must deal with every day as mayor. Perhaps now we could go to an earlier clip of what the mayor had to say about crime to the Democratic National Convention.
The sad truth is that George Bush was eager to stand with police officers for campaign photos, but he lacked the political courage to stand with them for gun laws that would make their lives more secure and our lives more secure. Bill Clinton and Al Gore have the courage to stand up for those laws. It's one of the reasons I'm here tonight standing up for them.
Former President Jimmy Carter made an appearance here earlier this evening and got a rousing reception from this crowd. He seems to be received better and better every 4 years. But tonight he turned foreign policy critic and blamed the Bush administration for their involvement in Third World Wars.
The world cries out for a peaceful resolution of conflict. But our country is seen as more warlike than peace-loving. We celebrated a great victory over tiny Grenada and later invaded Panama, where hundreds of our friends were killed. We promoted and financed the Contra War that caused 35,000 casualties in Nicaragua. There are even second thoughts about the Gulf War, where Saddam Hussein still reigns supreme in Iraq. Our country should seek greatness in peace, not war.
But I also think it's fair to say the star of the evening was, of course, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who gave a speech that was very reminiscent of the one he gave in Atlanta 4 years ago. Reverend Jackson had expressed some sensitivity about the fact that he was offered a speaking time during the All-Star game, but he did come up with a rousing performance. Here's some of what he had to say.
For them, jail is a step up. But once they are jailed, they'll no longer be hit by drive-by shootings. Once they are jailed, they're no longer homeless. Once they are jailed, they have balanced meals. Once they are jailed, it's warm in the wintertime. It's cool in the summertime. Once they are jailed, they have adult supervision. We must reach out to our children better than we have clean hearts and dirty hands than to have dirty hearts and clean hands. These are our children. These are our children.
You know, Chris and Robin, it almost doesn't seem like the Democratic National Convention because it's almost been like a love fest. It has been very, very carefully orchestrated to give the appearance of party unity. And outside of the problems with Jerry Brown, which may be resolved by tomorrow night, this whole convention has gone along very smoothly. Back to you.
Jack, Robin, and I think concur. As usual, Jesse Jackson was the most captivating speaker we have heard and perhaps will hear all week. I have a question to you, though, regards his role in this campaign this fall. Much has been made of the centrist stance of both Bill Clinton and Albert Gore, considerably less liberal than, say, a Michael Dukakis or 8 years ago Walter Mondale. And yet Jesse Jackson in his speech tonight was hitting on a lot of that old liberal ideology. Is that going to be his role? Is he going to continue being somewhat the social conscience, if you will, of the Democratic Party?
Oh, I think you're right, Chris. I think that will very much be his role. But I think part of the problem that Clinton and Gore are going to have is whether or not they can get Jesse Jackson out on the campaign trail to campaign for them enthusiastically. It's one thing to gain his endorsement. It's another thing to gain his full-fledged support. And I'm not really sure it's clear at this moment whether or not they have that.
Jack, a lot has been talked about unity, seems to be the part that they're preaching it like a religion there at the convention. You say it really doesn't seem like a Democratic National Convention because you do feel the difference. Aren't there some other voices of dissent besides the holdout Jerry Brown? Isn't there some debate going on about the abortion stance, for instance?
Well, there was some, Robin, but it did not surface in quite the same vociferous manner we had seen in previous conventions. And today, in particular, Bill Clinton tried to soothe the abortion issue by appearing before the Women's Caucus and telling them that being pro-choice was not quite the same as being pro-abortion. That may not totally satisfy activists on the abortion issue, but he is trying to broaden the appeal of the party and make it a more moderate plank.
One final question regards Mayor Daley tonight, Jack. What does this mean? He gets, as a mayor, a very high-profile job, speaking tonight at the Democratic National Convention, and yet he is a mayor who has, although he is certainly not a Republican, he's a Democrat, but he's had some strong leanings and has been really highly favored, if you will, many times by the Bush administration. Are we seeing a little solidifying of his role as a top Democratic mayor by the positioning of him tonight?
Oh, yes, very certainly, Chris, and I think we have to remember how much help he gave Bill Clinton. He gave him advisors, political advisors, a great deal of money, helped him to victory in Illinois. And Mayor Daley's moderate positions, as viewed by Bill Clinton at least, are part of the appeal that Clinton's trying to build into his campaign, and he needs Illinois desperately this fall if he has any chance for the presidency.
All right, Jack Conaty, thank you, reporting live from Madison Square Garden tonight. Thank you, Jack.
And one of the most
hot checks. So the Republican strategy is clearly aimed at running against the Congress, while the Democrats seem to believe they can win on the economy. 4 years ago, the Democrats sat on their hands during the Republican convention. This year, they're here and swinging. Jack Conaty, Fox News, Houston.
Jack Conaty is here with the story. Jack?
Robin, the most interesting twist in tonight's debate, of course, was the format. It really looked much more like Oprah or Phil Donahue than it did the panel format that is usually used. This was a format the Democrats wanted and the Republicans resisted, but George Bush came in needing a home run no matter what the format was. The pressure was on for President Bush.
That is, everybody races to have more and more gambling. Gambling only works historically for thousands of years if you get other people to come in and take their money. If you take your own money from each other, it doesn't work.
So while casino gambling is all but dead in this session, casino operators believe it is alive and well in Illinois. The question, they say, is not if, but when. Jack Conaty, Fox News, at the Capitol in Springfield.
The Senate scheduled a 3-hour hearing on casinos tomorrow. Jack Conaty will have full details on that meeting tomorrow night on Fox News Chicago.
Robin, Cook County is
forces tied up with the Cold War and with conservative politics in the Cold War era.
But Cold War era construct or not, the lifting or even easing of the ban on homosexuals angers, even frightens some in the military establishment.
The military views this as a problem in terms of unit cohesion, in terms of morale, in terms of problems for large numbers of people who have to live together, very close together, under very difficult and trying situations.
President Clinton, despite intense opposition, still plans to reverse the ban, but with a caveat. Here in Chicago, the Railroad Retirement Board could be merged with Social Security, costing some 1,300 jobs. But remember, it's all been tried before, some 10 times in this century, so don't expect any big changes quickly. Jack Conaty, Fox News, Chicago.
President
area. What we're really doing is we're saying, and in effect, it is divide and conquer.
But the first place divided over the plan will be Washington, where opposition to the idea is already building. Race and housing are the most sensitive subjects in American politics, and this plan will not become law without a fight. Jack Conaty, Fox News, Chicago.
The idea of public housing in the suburbs is a
commitment of the district. Jack Conaty is in the 5th District tonight to explain that to us. Jack?
Robin, the mayor calls it a feeding frenzy. The political corpse isn't even cold yet, and already the replacements are lining up to take Rosti's job. A process that will be an exercise in old-fashioned Chicago politics. Disaster in November, and will concentrate her efforts now to get out the vote in Chicago. The Edgar strategy is to paint Netsch as a tax and spend Democrat. She will paint him as a do-nothing Republican, and both hope the voters don't paint the entire campaign gray. Jack Conaty, Fox News, Chicago.
And again, with the election still some 9 weeks away, Democrat Netsch is...
Boys unions and advocates for the poor.
This is being paid. I think he took the gun and shot himself in both feet this time as opposed to 1 foot. And this is the beginning of the end for Philip.
But there is no indication tonight that Philip will resign or that his seat in the Senate is in any jeopardy. He remains on vacation in Upper Michigan and unreachable, and aides say there are no plans for any apologies. Jack Conaty, Fox News, Chicago.
Philip is expected to return to the Chicago area sometime next week.
And get our numbers fixed in just a minute. But first, we go to the Daily Election Headquarters, where our Jack Conaty is standing by live. Jack?
Walter, obviously everybody here is ready for a big party tonight. This has been a remarkably calm and self-possessed celebration so far this evening. In talking to the Daily people earlier this evening, they were talking about numbers. a victory total somewhere between 75 and 80%, perhaps a little higher. They said the low turnout today is actually a reflection of the fact that there's no mandate for change at City Hall. The people in Chicago are, in fact, very pleased with the job that Richard Daley has done so far, and that there is no discernible outcry from the populace for a change. But interestingly enough, most of the speculation here tonight centers on Roland Burris and whether or not Mr. Burris may in fact be reconsidering his run for mayor. We talked to David Axelrod, Mayor Daley's campaign consultant, and David said he would not be surprised at this juncture if Roland Burris in fact began a reconsideration in light of what is expected to be an overwhelming victory by Mayor Daley tonight. So that's where it stands right now. We expect the mayor downstairs here sometime between 9:15 and 9:30, that as always, depending upon Joe Gardner and whether or not Mr. Gardner decides to concede sometime in the next half hour, a concession that everyone here fully expects. Walter, Robin, back to you.
Okay, Jack, thank you. At Daley headquarters, if Daley's the winner, we have to have a loser. That seems to be Joe Gardner.
But I think many of those are going to be offset by the fact that he's running as an independent.
No response yet from Mayor Daley, who is still vacationing in Florida. The election now just 1 month away. Jack Conaty, Fox News, Chicago.
The Burris campaign got off to a shaky start with the media.
This case has raised serious questions about victims' rights and the practice of bonding murder suspects in Illinois.
And I often wonder, why doesn't the justice system protect the innocent people? Why do they...
Happy about that.
The verdict here leaves prosecutors stammering and creates the impression that Dean Olds and Helmut Hofer literally got away with murder.
A not guilty verdict. I think y'all are missing the boat. You and the media are missing it.
Dempsey Travis says what's missing this time around is an African-American candidate with charisma and the common touch, not just money. Fortunately for Richard Daley, Roland Burris is missing all three. Jack Conaty, Fox News, Chicago.
The latest Chicago Tribune poll shows the mayor with a comfortable 30-point lead in the campaign.
Have been done.
Mayor Daley insists the city will be ready for any return of hot weather this weekend, but for some critics, anything he does now seems too little, too late. Jack Conaty, Fox News, Chicago.
The mayor says the city is planning a memorial service for the victims of the heat.
Background shouldn't be a felon.
In less than 2 weeks, everyone will be back here to try it again. But tonight, there are no guarantees the entire crime bill will ever be passed again. Jack Conaty, Fox News, Springfield.
Even if she were interested.
This is the sort of story political junkies love, but it's long on speculation and short on facts. And getting elected to statewide office in Illinois takes more than a village. Jack Conaty, Fox News, Chicago.